Hey guys. This is what if Naruto perfected Shadow Clone Jutsu. The ultimate strategy. An unconscious Iruka forces Naruto to return to the academy for another year. It also marks the beginnings of a prank whose far-reaching consequences will shake Konoha to its foundations. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 1 Prologue. Naruto Uzumaki was not a person who punished harshly. He'd had a harsh life, true, but he'd always looked for the bright side of things. Moaning about your problems never did anything about them, and brought you no closer to your goals. When possible, he turned the other cheek, else he pranked. This was how he was. His harsh life, however, had brought one thing: he was very defensive of those he called friends. He had very few of those, and before their pain his was nothing. So, knowing that, it can be said that the beating Naruto gave Mizuki, his old taijutsu teacher, was entirely in proportion with the crime. By Konoha law, the man was guilty of treason, so no one would be angry at Mizuki's death, but Naruto stayed his hand, or hands in this case, and left the man alive. Beaten to a bloody pulp, true, but alive. Hee. I went a little too far. Iruka? He turned around to talk to the second man he could call a friend, after the Sandaime. The Chunin was unmoving, his head having fallen back some time while the many Narutos were beating on Mizuki. Iruka? Naruto had not listened much to his lessons in first aid, but nevertheless remembered some. His favorite instructor's temperature was not normal, and his breathing was slow. It was visible something was wrong with him. It took but a second for Naruto to call back his clones, though some had already left for his apartment as he'd instructed them do. They quickly gathered Iruka's body, making sure to step on Mizuki a few times along the way, and dashed from tree to tree holding his body aloft. Naruto could see the remaining clones gather Mizuki none too gently and follow him, but his mind was focused on getting Iruka to the hospital as soon as possible. When Naruto arrived to the hospital, the Hokage was already there, reinforcing Naruto's ingrained knowledge that the Sandaime always knew everything just as it happened and just let him do his pranks out of pleasure for the results. He was actually proud that his own technique had managed to knock the old man down for once. He'd normally be bragging about it by now, but he had more important things to do. Two medical ninjas stepped from behind the town leader as soon as the clones holding Iruka touched the ground, gathered the Chunin and brought him inside on a stretcher. Two of those weird masked ninja did the same with Mizuki's body, though these didn't bother with the stretcher. The one behind the chrome mask even covered a snort when one of his clones gave him a last kick right between the legs, and Naruto counted every emotion he'd get from those people as a victory. They'd been checking him in his apartment for years, and they always seemed like moving stone statues for all feelings they showed. The Hokage stepped forward then, as the two masked ones were bouncing from roof to roof, and stopped a few meters in front of the mass of clones. You don't think I need the protection of so many ninjas, do you? Many ninjas. Oh, he meant his clones. With a single seal and a thought, they all disappeared in various puffs of smoke, and the satisfaction he felt from having gotten one last kick at Mizuki redoubled in his mind. Good. I see you managed to make good use of your time with this scroll. May I take it back? Naruto sheepishly handed the scroll back, having completely forgotten the fact that he'd stolen it from the very same man hours earlier. The Sandaime quickly looked at it, probably to verify it was what it was supposed to be, then held it under his shoulder. Will Iruka be all right, old man? He couldn't help himself but ask. I'm sure he will be. In 1 or 2 days he'll probably come see you again. The Sandaime did that weird thing where he looked directly at the Hokage monument, as if he was thinking of someone. Nah, probably just liked looking at his own face. It's late, and I'll probably have twice as much paperwork waiting for me when I get back. I think we're both better off returning home, aren't we? Naruto nodded. He skipped dinner getting that scroll, and a good dose of ramen was exactly what he needed. Good night then. The old man then that vanishing leaf ninja trick he always did, and Naruto bounced from roof to roof towards home and ramen. The smell of ramen hit his nose before he was even home. He cleared the few remaining meters at a run and entered his apartment to find a dozen copies of himself around his table, on his bed, on the ground, and even one on his kitchen counter. And they were all eating ramen. You no good bastards, you better have left some for me, or I'm bursting you all and taking all that ramen for myself. The clones, knowing Naruto as much as they did themselves, had evidently foreseen this particular possibility, as another hot cup of ramen was waiting by for him on the kitchen counter. He wasted no time gulping down a good portion of the still slightly crunchy noodles, savoring the taste of his favorite food. By the third bite, however, he realized something. Some of his clones were different than the others, having a large scroll on their back like he'd worn the scroll of forbidden seals earlier in the day. Oh yeah! He'd forgotten because of the whole beatdown on Mizuki thing and the rush to the hospital, but he'd made 4 or so clones while first escaping his former taijutsu teacher. Those here with the scroll must be the same he'd made then, who'd come back here like the others. Wait a minute. Naruto drained the rest of his noodles in one great gulp, and walked with determination towards one of these clones, who was still savoring his own ramen. Unlatching the scroll, he quickly examined it. The Kage Bunshin directions were still there, and yes, another technique afterwards. If a single technique from that scroll could make him able to beat down a Chunin, imagine how much closer to Hokage he'd be with a dozen. Or maybe even more. Looking back at the clones still eating ramen, he realized he had no clue how long they'd last. Better off copying the techniques on other scrolls first. He probably didn't have time to train in a dozen before they disappeared, anyway. Dashing to his room, he came back holding on every single empty scroll he owned. It was quite a few. He'd never have thought that not doing his homework could be so useful. It left him with plenty of spare scrolls to write on, though. He'd barely started writing when the sound of slurping noodles behind him clued him to a much better and faster way of doing this. Hey you guys, stop eating! A few of his clones did stop, though the majority kept on. One even gave him the finger. He resisted the urge to burst that one, but held back as it was one with a scroll. I'm bursting the first one who hasn't finished his ramen in 10 seconds. The sounds of slurping noodles were a balm to Naruto's ears, and before long all clones were looking at him expectantly. It was good to be listened to. Okay. You and you, he said, pointing to the clone he'd taken the scroll from, and another clone, this one without a scroll. You're with me. The others in teams of 3, with 1 scroll per team. The one remaining. Naruto looked down at his pile of blank scrolls, then at the Forbidden Seals scroll. Nope, probably not enough scrolls to copy down everything. You go buy some more scrolls and markers. Oh, and some more ramen while you're at it. He tossed his purse at that one, who was already out the door. Now, everyone call out the technique he's copying, since we don't need any duplicates. I've already started with Shikifujin, so I'm taking that one. The rest of you, go! The sun was rising in the eastern sky when the Naruto squad finished copying down the contents of the Forbidden Scroll. They worked all night, but Naruto wasn't really feeling tired. Probably because of all the ramen he'd just eaten. He'd been right to send a clone out to purchase stuff, as without that they'd have run out of scrolls before even hitting the second quarter of the Forbidden Seals, and would have run out of ramen not much later. And they'd at least needed a second marker each, too. Now that the copying was done, each Naruto was catching up on some other things. Unsurprisingly, from half of them, that meant ramen. 2 others were sleeping, 3 were down on the scrolls, examining them and comparing them to the original, and 1 even decided to take a bath. Surprisingly, they all lasted up until now with no need to recreate any of them. Naruto was still wondering when they'd burst by themselves. He himself was rereading about the Kage Bunshin on the copy he'd made earlier. He'd mostly made it for completion's sake, but realized up by rereading that he'd barely glanced at half the scroll while training in the forest. Most of what he'd ignored was under the headings Dangers and Reasons of Being Forbidden. As such, he found himself struggling to understand the following passage. Else the danger of severe chakra depletion due to the technique's inherent division process. The other danger is a form of psychic damage due to the return of a clone's secondary consciousness to the primary one, a form of mental overload due to excess information. As such, it is not recommended to use this technique for upwards of a dozen clones, due to the possibility of multiple memories returning simultaneously, harming the user's psyche and possibly causing personality disorders. He did understand the last phrase, but made no sense of it. He'd burst 100 or so clones in front of the hospital yesterday, and felt no adverse effect. But he didn't remember anything about memories returning or anything of that essence. He brought the matter to the 3 clones now nearly done with their verification, and as a group decided on a simple way of testing this effect. One of the copies grabbed Naruto's dictionary, whose normal use was propping up the kitchen table, opened it at a random page, looked at the first word he'd found there, then dropped the book on his foot, bursting himself. Incendiary, incendiary, all the clones chorused in a single voice. One of them even verified in yes, that word, the first word on a page near the middle of the book, which was then put back to his original use. Naruto now even remembered coming up with the idea and looking in the book, even though it was the clone that had done such things. Damn, that was one powerful technique. The Naruto copy who'd decided to take a bath chose that particular time to come out, and noted, shouldn't you be going to the academy around this time? With his hair dripping all over the dirty clothing that made most of Naruto's carpet. Half of the Narutos in the room shot up at that statement, though only the real Naruto didn't go back to what he was doing. He dashed around, gathering the ninja equipment he'd carelessly dropped all over the place, and shot through the window, his usual shortcut for when he was late somewhere. Mizuki said he'd pass with one technique, so he couldn't wait to show it at the academy. He couldn't wait to get his hands on his own Hittite. Man, today was gonna be the best. Chapter 1. Beginnings of a prank? Absolutely not. Why would stealing something forbidden even give you any opportunity to become a ninja? Personally, it'd be thankful the Hokage didn't arrest you like he should have. But Mizuki. And I don't see why the words of a traitor would have any impact on my decision. Actually, the fact that it came from him just proves that it shouldn't be used to help you pass. Kazuhi was one of the academy instructors Naruto liked the least. He'd been teaching since the boy entered the academy years ago, and kept punishing him whenever anything went wrong in a class, whether or not it had anything to do with him. Luckily, the man only taught shinobi history, and not important things like ninjutsu or taijutsu. Nevertheless, he'd always been a thorn in Naruto's side. The time he made the teacher fall through his chair was a good memory, though. Even counting the fact that this jutsu of yours would pass you the ninjutsu portion of the exam, you barely passed your accuracy, failed your taijutsu, and that's not talking about your abysmal score in both the history and math examinations. Even that wouldn't bring your score to the lowest passing grade. But, no, and that's final. Whatever that traitor said is of no import. Uzumaki-san, I will see in 2 weeks at the beginning of the next term. Good day. The man gave him a smile Naruto could only define as pleased, and shut the door to the teacher's lounge in front of his face. Dejected, Naruto shambled back to his apartment with slow steps. The downtime between academy years had always been the worst time for him, as he didn't even have school to do. He had no pranks planned either, so no clue how he'd survive the incoming boredom of the following weeks. Re-entering his home, Naruto found that his clones were still present and, in some cases, still eating ramen. They didn't seem affected by the fact he'd have to retake the whole academy year for the 4th time. Then again, he realized, they probably didn't even know about it yet. Naruto woke the few clones that were sleeping and, with all of them around him listening, he explained his situation. The reactions he got were varied. A few wanted to prank that Kazuhi hard, and some even had good suggestions about how to go about it. Though Naruto didn't think he'd be able to get his hands on that many eggs, one argued about going to the Hokage with what Mizuki told him, but Naruto had to admit that would probably go as well as the first time he did so, and he'd be back in the academy nonetheless. The others were as depressed as him by the news, and the whole council degenerated into a large shouting match. Luckily Naruto's immediate neighbors had long vacated the place, else he'd have gotten a visit by his landlord. All that stopped when a girl stepped through the windows. She was blonde, thin and a little taller than Naruto. She was holding down 2 shopping bags full of ramen in one hand, and using the other to pull herself inside. "Hey guys, you can believe what I just found out," was the first thing she said upon coming in. "Who the hell are you?" was the general answer by the mass of copies, including the original Naruto. She looked down at herself and, realizing something, did a single hand seal, releasing her henge and turning into another clone of Naruto. So clones can use techniques. That meant Naruto just had a horribly interesting way to duplicate the power of his own created technique, one which would be sure to knock even the Sandaime in the hospital. Looking around, Naruto realized that by the faces his clones were making, the same idea had occurred to them. They all turned towards him. "Harem no Jutsu," they all said in the exact same moment. He nodded along with the clones. They now had another new technique, one even more powerful than his other original one. Before he could start laughing at the face Iruka or the Hokage would do, the clone who had just returned interrupted them again. "No, something else. You know how shopkeepers would kick us out all the time, sell us only old stuff, or overcharge us horribly? All the other Narutos nodded. They now knew why, but they had dealt with that for a long time. Well, using henge, we can bypass that. I just came from the store in front of the flower shop, you know, the one with the spitting old man. They all nodded once more. Once that geezer had known that Naruto liked ramen, he'd taken it off the floor, removing the possibility of Naruto having any. He couldn't stop trying to spit on him, either. Well, I went there like this. He turned back into his former female form with a single seal. And the man couldn't help but being friendly. He even gave me a discount. Naruto, and about half of the clones, hit themselves in the head at the thought. They'd known that technique for years, and never tried applying it in that particular set of circumstances. Thinking how much more ramen he could have had if he'd. Another of the clones, though, shot up from his chair. We can use that. All the clones looked at him bizarrely. No, I mean, at the academy. You know how some teachers use any excuse to kick us out of the class, or tie us in a corner. All nodded. Well, we could get 1 or 2 clones in the academy, under henge, pretending to be other students. So whenever Naruto gets kicked out, the others will still be there, and we might finally be able to ace those tests and graduate. Naruto agreed that it might work. Even better yet, it was like a prank. He'd be pulling a fast one in front of everyone, especially those stuffy academy teachers. Even better about that, if any of the clones pass the test while the original doesn't, we can just go to the Hokage with the fact that the clones under henge are the same person as Naruto, and use that as an argument that we should pass. I'm sure the Hokage won't say no as long as we can prove that we did pass those exams. Naruto looked around to see that all the clones were discussing either the possibilities of this prank, or how to make it work. Thinking about it, there wasn't any reason not to try it. So, everyone's in agreement it seems. All nodded. So now let's get to the planning of that prank. First point to decide on is number, the clone under henge started. How many clones are we gonna insert in the academy? 2. 2. 2's best. The rest nodded along. The transformed copy continued. Personally, I'd suggest making the 2 as different as possible to avoid both getting caught at the same time. True. Only problem is, the original Naruto interjected, keeping them from bursting. Any good hit could blow the whole thing up, and let's not talk about running out of chakra. I know I made you all yesterday, and you've lasted till now, but in a school where we'll be supposed to try techniques dozens of times, I can't say if you'll just disappear when using one. I might have an idea about that, replied 3 different clones simultaneously. They dug in the pile of scrolls behind them, and came out with a specific one. Chakra draining technique. Why would that be banned? The clone holding the scroll opened it, and read a single passage. For those not of the Akado bloodline, overusing this technique has been known to cause damage to the chakra coils, weakening them over time to the point of useless. Even sporadic usage of this technique will cause irreparable damage over a few months of time. So why should we be using it? Naruto asked. You shouldn't. The clone replied to the original. But we clones should. With that, as long as we have a source of chakra, we would technically last forever. At worst, we'd be able to drain some chakra from you to last longer. Naruto nodded. He'd known for quite a while that he'd never have any problem with chakra in terms of amount, especially after the massive clone spree of yesterday, which didn't even leave him tired. The scroll he'd written about that particular technique said that even a single clone took enormous amount of chakra, so 100 times that meant he'd probably never have any problem concerning too little chakra. The scroll quickly got passed around, and Naruto realized that even training in that technique might be dangerous for him. He thought about grabbing another one for an instant, but noticed that there were already enough Narutos training in his admittedly small apartment. Time to test how much a henge could change things, then. The answer to that question, Naruto found, was everything. Naruto was used to receiving very specific types of looks from the populace. There were looks of rage and hate, which were especially preeminent in his various neighbors. There were looks of fear, which Naruto saw less and less as time went on. Finally, there were looks of disgust, and those only increased with time. And now, there were looks of pride. He was currently under a henge, looking like a brown-haired and male version of a girl Naruto had gone to class with in his first year at the academy. She hadn't been anything special, hadn't passed her exams or returned the following year, but Naruto always remembered her as one of the rare girls who laughed at the various pranks he did in class. He remembered her well enough to use her as a template for his transformation. And that transformation, as said before, changed everything. People were waving as Naruto passed by, some looking down at him with looks of recognition towards a future Konoha shinobi. Coming inside a weapons store that was well known never to accept his presence, Naruto saw with surprise the shopkeeper smiling and beckoning him in, extolling the various specials he had. Using the purse he'd reclaimed from his clone, he even bought a full new set of kunai, the ones on sale of an obviously better quality than those he bought, for a premium, he now realized, in one of the rare used merchandise stores that acknowledged his presence. Now back outside, he realized how much his clone must have been surprised to see the difference in atmosphere. The Konoha Naruto used to know, one that was at times oppressive and hateful, now seemed to welcome him with open arms. Seeing his favorite ramen stand up ahead, he wondered how Ayame and her father saw Konoha. Being civilians, they would probably have a very different view of the village, one that Naruto had no clue about. For a second, seeing two of the people he respected the most in the city, he wondered what life would have been if he had been a simple civilian. He wondered how they managed to live their lives. Wait a minute. Who said he couldn't find out? If he was planning to infiltrate an academy full of apprentice shinobi with chunin teachers, surely he could manage to do the same in a school where there were no ninjas around. It was just an extra 2 clones, nothing that could tire him overmuch, and there were plenty of things he could learn that civilians did. There were blacksmiths and tailors and cooks. The many possibilities were colliding in his head when it was assaulted by a dozen memories. He suddenly remembered going shopping during the night, and finding out the effect of a simple henge won the populace, and training to draw chakra into oneself, and… Naruto shook his head, returning to the present. Seemed like the first of his clones and finally burst. Somewhere around 18 to 20 hours, not bad for a first try. Especially since that was the clone that used techniques during the past day. Turning back towards his apartment, he was quickly assaulted by more thoughts from his bursting clones. By the time he had entered his kitchen, he could now remember being on all sides of the discussion earlier and writing down hundreds of techniques during the night. He barely remembered the individual techniques, as those memories merged into one another seamlessly, but bits and pieces were coming back to him one by one. His apartment was now empty of clones, so he created another dozen to continue training. He himself, however, turned towards his bed. He hadn't slept at all during the past night, and, while he wasn't especially tired, he was expecting another late-night training in the following evening. It was a clone bursting that brought him back to wakefulness. The memories it previously had interfered and merged with the dream he was having, and that alone brought his consciousness back up. As he stretched, another one of his clones vanished, and Naruto could guess the rest wouldn't last much longer. A look at his alarm clock proved what his clone's memories told him. He had barely slept 5 hours. Nevertheless, he felt quite rested and ready to tackle this night's training. By the time he'd finished his triple order of ramen, he was the only Naruto left in existence in his apartment. The latest memories confirmed that his clones hadn't managed to get the technique right just yet. Some had thought they had the right way, and others believed they'd managed to succeed for a second, but none could say that they'd really managed to do it right. Jumping out of his window, Naruto angled his descent to bounce from rooftop to rooftop, trusting his feet to lead him instinctively where he planned on training. His thoughts, however, were on other things. What he really wondered was how many clones he could manage in a single try. He'd known that he could create more than 100, his battle against Mizuki being proof of that, but that was after a hard day's training without stopping to eat or rest. The only other times he'd used the technique, he'd limited himself to a few clones as the situation restricted him. Now, though, he was well rested and as fully fed as he could get. Since he would be in the same training spot he'd used to master the Kage Bunshin, he could fill the area to his heart's content and not bother anyone. Barely a dozen minutes later, he was back where he'd first opened the scroll yesterday. The actual spot was easy to find, especially with the burnt circle of grass he'd left behind. The result of one of his most spectacular failures, he'd somehow put himself on fire trying to channel chakra. He'd now forgotten how he'd actually managed to accomplish such an event. Well, it's not like he'd be training about being on fire anyway. Standing in the middle of that circle, he focused his energies the needed way for the Kage Bushins to appear. He drew upon his chakra on and on, until he was scrapping the very bottom of reserves. At the exact instant he'd reached the end of his forces, his hands moved together in a flash, creating the needed seal to call out the technique. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. For a second, it was like someone had whacked the camera of reality, as the world shimmered before his eyes. Then it turned orange. Naruto couldn't say how many Kage Bunshins he'd created. Turning around, going up to the farthest he could see and probably even beyond that, there was a copy of his traditional suit moving around. Clones were hanging from trees like giant's leaves, and one even emerged from a pit in the ground. He was tired, true, but that was way beyond what he'd achieved against Mizuki. Naruto hadn't actually seen that much people in one place. Ever. Sitting down to recover his breath, he yelled at the awaiting army. "Well, you people know what to do. There's ramen at Ichiraka for the first one who gets it right." A great chorus of ramen answered him, as clones split up to train. Some went to other clones, some to trees, and some even caught small animals to practice on, but all spread and started on the steps to master the technique. Naruto was poked awake some amount of time later. Judging by the sky, it was still night, so it could be between 15 minutes to a few hours since he'd fallen asleep. His nap was a reward for his success with the Kage Bunshin. It was either that or selecting another technique and trying to learn it, and Naruto didn't believe he could easily find a spot to train without having to displace a shadow clone. He quickly realized his clones were still going at it, and he wondered why one had bothered to wake him. He valued his sleep and his clones knew that, so he expected not to be forced to rise for nothing. The clone who'd poked him was standing right beside him, waiting. Naruto caught the difference between him and his other clones instantly. This copy had a dozen extra kunai hanging from the front of his jacket, and 2 shuriken more than half Naruto's height strapped to his back. Those shuriken were very familiar, Naruto noticed. Then he saw the dried blood on one of them. Oh yeah! Mizuki had nailed Iruka with one of those. Looking around, he remembered it wasn't very far from here that the confrontation had occurred, and that Mizuki hadn't been in any state to gather the weapons he'd thrown. "Remembered about those?" the clone answered. "I found them while looking around for a place to train." And that wasn't all. Opening one of his front pocket, he withdrew 2 other small shuriken, some length of ninja wire, and a single explosive tag. The tag was what surprised Naruto. An explosive tag? When? How did you? Seemed the tag must have been there for a long while, since it's no longer primed to explode. At first I kept my distance and poked it with a stick, then when I got no reaction I stripped the layer of bark it was on. No reaction either. Even taking it off with my fingers didn't make it explode, so I felt safe bringing it here. Does it work? Go ahead and find out. The clone handed Naruto the tag. Naruto wasted no time. Explosive tags were something he knew how to use very well. They'd been covered every year he was at the academy, and Naruto had made a point of always attending and staying awake during that lesson. The opportunity to blow something up was well worth listening to that class each time. In less than a second, Naruto had twirled the tag around one of his kunai, primed the tag for explosion in 5 seconds, and thrown the weapon at a rock standing a dozen meters away. The explosion wasn't totally unexpected, but still surprised Naruto. The implications of that were enormous. Because of the reactions of the general populace towards him, Naruto was well used to working with substandard equipment, or no equipment at all. The fact that simply looking around could get him some, even things like giant shuriken that already weren't easily accessible to anybody, made a big difference. Especially considering explosive tags, those being costly and difficult to have in large quantities by academy students. "Good work," Naruto said to his armed doppelganger, slapping him lightly on the shoulder for good measure. "You just won yourself some Ichiraka ramen tomorrow." The clone bounced away, promising to continue searching, when a burst of memories took all Naruto's. It wasn't, as he'd hoped, the knowledge of how to perform the technique, but was something nearly as good. A clone had just been drained to dispersion by another one. It took barely a few moments before said clone bounced in the clearing where Naruto had been sleeping. The smile on his face was infectious, and the various exclamations of success were quickly spreading through the forest. The successful clone stopped directly in front of Naruto, with a dozen extra following. "Did it, boss?" "Show me." The clone did 3 seals in quick succession, and laid his hand on Naruto's shoulder. Instantly, Naruto felt how the technique worked. He remembered it from the memories of his now vanished clone, but these feelings were different. It was like a vacuum sucking sand from all over the inside of his body. It was a bizarre sensation. Naruto pushed the clone's hand away from his shoulder, smiling all the while. Regardless of how it felt to be on the receiving end, it was evident he now had a new technique under his belt. Even if that was one only his clones could use. Good work, you two. You're the one who gets ramen tomorrow. The clone jumped of joy. You know what to do, right? Right. With a familiar hand seal, the clone created another clone right beside him. Go on, the first clone said to the second. Taking a big swing, the second clone landed a fast punch square between his two eyes, dispersing himself. Instantly, Naruto and all of him copies knew what the clone had, meaning the workings of the jutsu they'd been slaving on. They also remembered the exact feeling of drawing chakra from something. It was very different from being on the receiving end, more like hundreds of small electric shocks, only feeling good. All the clones bounced back to wherever that had been training, while Naruto cornered the armed clone again. After a few words and a little draining of chakra, a clone of the armed copy was standing before the original. Okay. Naruto had something to try. He needed to pass an order to all his clones, and this was the only way he'd reach them all before the end of the night. I'm gonna use you to pass along an order, okay? The clone nodded. Okay. Naruto took a deep breath. All clones are to go around any empty places found and try to gather anything that's been left behind. Don't take any junk, but bring back anything that might be useful. Done. Hearing that, the clone smashed his head on a nearby rock, dispersing himself instantly. There was a great cry of Roger, and the various copies hanging around started moving and looking around. Naruto himself left them to their job, and started the trek towards his apartment. In between the drainings, his interrupted nap and the Kage Bunshins, he needed ramen and sleep, both in large quantities. He'd see what his clones could find tomorrow. As Naruto stretched upon waking up, he realized he had received during the night dozens of memories from bursting clones. He wondered why that hadn't interrupted his sleep this time, but filed that question as unimportant. More than 100 copies of himself had perished during the night. Explosive tags were the undisputed kings of shadow clone elimination, though the various traps in Training Area 32 had taken more than 40 by themselves. Some of the deaths were humorous, like the one who'd fallen prey to something akin to a giant hamster in Training Area 15, or the one which, by kicking a tree in frustration, managed to make a falling branch impale him. Dressing up quickly, he was surprised upon entering his apartment. He knew what the fallen clones had found, and they'd found much, but that was nothing compared to what his clones had stacked inside his apartment. 3 Bunshins were actually still sorting through a pile of random stuff, a pile that clones, under various henges, coming and going, were adding to haphazardly. 4 others were drawing on something Naruto realized was his spare bed sheet. They had already drawn what Naruto noticed being the only complete map he'd ever seen of Konoha. 2 clones were actually arguing on the relative size of a training ground, only to be corrected by a clone passing by to drop what looked to be 24 mixed shuriken and kunai. Said shuriken and kunai were quickly collected, checked and put away in specific boxes. Some, which Naruto suspected were either too damaged, too rusted or too blunt, were neglectfully tossed into a large crate that had replaced his kitchen table. Naruto turned towards one of the few clones that wasn't busy and was, unsurprisingly, eating ramen. And how many clones are still out there? Don't know, somewhere over 1,000? Naruto was suddenly hit by the massive scale of what he summoned yesterday. He knew Bunshins could now technically survive indefinitely now simply by drawing chakra out of trees, but he never expected to be able to do so much in some little time. Looking around, he wondered if he'd ever need any more equipment in this life, even counting he'd be 3 people at the academy. You want a summary? The clone formerly eating ramen asked. Naruto nodded. There and there, he said, pointing to 2 piles of crates. Are the kunai and shuriken. This one. He gestured towards a smaller pile. Holds the samban. On the far wall are all other weapons, katana, spears, various polearms, fuma shuriken, those 2 staves, the clone continued on. Naruto was amazed at the wealth of different weapons that could be found if you looking far enough. Now on that wall is the rest, bits and pieces of different armors, different scrolls, and mainly the new collection we have of Hitaiite. Collection? Yeah, we found most of them far in the forest, probably leftovers from various spying attempts. Some of them were still on a ninja's head, but we got used to that. I said only stuff left behind. I meant on a dead ninja's head. We buried the leaf ninjas we found, and brought back whatever information we could about them, But normal paper doesn't survive the passing of time very well, you realize. Naruto nodded as he took a closer look at this so-called collection. It was simply various headbands pinned using shuriken to the back of a large wooden board that Naruto formerly used as target practice. He had to agree that they almost had them all. Leaf, cloud, sand, rock, mist, all the main ones were there, including most of them in missing Ning version. Only missing sand was left to get among those. There was also a good amount of the ones from lesser villages. From those Naruto recognized grass and waterfall, though they were the only ones he could name. There was one with a crescent moon Naruto was sure to have seen before, but couldn't for the life of him remember where. As two clones entered from the window, Naruto decided he had enough equipment for now. "Okay, people, listen up." All of the copies stopped what they were doing and turned towards him. "I think we have enough stuff for now. Those working on the map and those cleaning up the pile can finish up what they're doing, but everyone coming back with stuff doesn't go back for more." "What are we gonna be doing?" noted one of the recently returned clones. "We're gonna be going through this," the original countered, pointing at the pile of scrolls they copied from the Forbidden One. "We're gonna need to classify those. For classifications, learnable, those needing we know specific techniques beforehand, those we won't ever be able to do, like those that need specific bloodline or such stuff, and those we've got no use learning, like suicidal techniques or stuff that would kill us." He took a deep breath. "Let's get to it, people." "Yeah." Yumino Iruka was glad to finally be out of the hospital. A general antitoxin had easily flushed out the poison from his system, but the medic had kept him for an extra day just to make sure he'd purged out everything that QB brat did, as they said it. The Chunin knew that Naruto had nothing to do with him being poisoned or any of his other wounds, so guessed that Naruto must have been the one to carry his unconscious body to the hospital. Unsurprising, since the other possible survivor of that battle, Mizuki, would probably have given him a quick death instead of a trip to a healer. Concerning the specifics of that battle, his own memory was pretty fuzzy. He remembered Naruto coming out of hiding to protect him, a few words here and there of banter between the two ninja, and nothing conclusive after that. He thought he'd seen Naruto use a cloning technique to fill the forest with clones, but wasn't really sure if that was a hallucination or a genuine memory. It wasn't that he doubted the talent of one of his favorite students, no. It was simply that someone like Naruto, whose lack of skill with the bunshins was legendary, could manage such a feat? He'd have to see it with his own eyes. And that was what he was doing, visiting Naruto. He'd already gone to Ichiraku and ordered a dozen or so bowls to go. He'd owed Naruto that much for the save, and he'd wanted to talk to the boy. As a teacher, Iruka had access to the addresses of any of his students. He'd never been to Naruto's place, though one look at the building and his neighborhood, and the teacher understood why Naruto had never invited him there. Frankly, the place was a dump. However, it was visible Naruto was home, judging by the sounds coming from his open window. Iruka made his way to the top floor, noting the many voices coming from his student's apartment. Judging that Naruto probably had someone over, he politely knocked on the door. "Hello Naruto, it's Iruka. Can I come in?" Chapter 2, The Help of a Friend. "Hello Naruto, it's Iruka. Can I come in?" The Chunin's voice echoed all through the apartment, cutting the various Naruto's conversations to shreds. "Shit!" they all whispered. And then they all burst into a flurry of motion. The original Naruto quickly rose up to order them around, but realized it was useless. The 40 or so clones that had been sorting scrolls in his apartment had launched themselves into a blitz of hiding and displacing the various weapons and other equipment that wasn't supposed to be in the room. Clones tossed each other crates as his bedroom got filled with most of the spare ninja tools. 8 bunshins struggled by his window to shove through the small opening the crate full of damaged or useless stuff. The map had disappeared. The board with his collection had been turned around, revealing once more the photo of Sasuke Naruto used to aim for. A great noise sounded as the garbage crate finally gave up its struggles to remain inside the apartment, and shattered upon arriving upon ground level. Memories surged from the 4 clones that were supposed to have caught it, but Naruto ignored them with a shake of his head. "Naruto, are you there?" "Coming," he answered, just to buy some more time. The room was more than half empty now, and most of what was left was stray bits of armor or spare weapons on the far wall. The original joined the others there, helping shove every remaining instrument into a small closet. When the weapons were done, he shoved the remaining clones there too, and closed it forcefully. At least one clone dispersed from the impact, but Naruto once again ignored to memories returning. A quick look around revealed that nearly all the items the clones had hoarded in his apartment were out of sight, the rest were not numerous enough to cause concern. At worst he'd look like a slob who couldn't take care of his room, but that was good enough. Naruto, I'm coming in. Iruka expected to find Naruto trying to hide dirty clothes as he came in, but he was disappointed. He found Naruto standing right in front of him with a sheepish smile on his face. Warning, was the instant reaction of his subconscious. Now Iruka was well known for many things. He was an extremely good teacher, who was neither too rough nor too soft. He was a good ninja, with a mastery of the basics well beyond most of his age. He was a kind man, who gave all a chance to prove themselves. But all that paled compared to his mastery of the many faces of Naruto Uzumaki. He'd taught the boy for 2 years, and if he couldn't read the blonde boy's emotions on his face, no one could. And that same knowledge told Iruka that he'd caught Naruto at a moment where he wasn't supposed to. The way the boy's eyes tilted told him that much. He'd been planning a prank, as evidenced by the slight smile in the corner of his mouth. Hi Naruto. Would you mind some ramen? The way the child hesitated meant that this was something big. He'd never seen Naruto hesitate in front of free ramen. The warning signals in his mind just tripled. Sure, Iruka-sensei. Iruka's eyebrows surged on their own accord. Whatever the boy was hiding was beyond the big stage now. He'd been polite, and not jumped of joy at the thought of free ramen. The only time he'd seen Naruto this polite was when he'd asked by borrow his Hittite. This didn't bode well. Instinctively, the Chunin took his environment into account. Small living room of a 2.5. Clothes and various ninja equipment strewn all around on the ground. Nothing unusual there. He'd been a teenager living alone once, and this state was par to the course. No kitchen table. Bizarre. No, there it is, jammed in a corner of his apartment. Maybe he'd been training? No, doesn't smell like that. Might explain the noises he heard though. Something was nagging him though, and he looked around. Open window. Nothing special. But with all the doors closed? That's when it flashed to him. While there was lots of stuff all around on the ground, every single door was closed. Cupboards, closet, bathroom, even the door leading to what Iruka expected was his bedroom. An energetic boy like Naruto, living alone, wouldn't have any reason to close the door to his bedroom, unless it was to hide something. He turned towards the boy who was still smiling his sheepish smile. Naruto. What are you hiding from me? Nothing. Then there's no reason you'd mind me looking into your bedroom now, would it? Naruto locked his eyes with those of his teacher. They were firm and hard, just like any time the Chunin discussed punishment with him. He'd never gotten the better of Iruka in one of those situations either. Thinking fast, he made and discarded hundreds of plans. Escape meant nothing if the Chunin found all that was hidden in his various rooms, and fighting was straight out of the question. He'd have to go all out to even manage to beat his friend, and that would be a stopgap measure at best since he knew that Iruka wouldn't leave the matter alone until he was satisfied. That meant the only option was to include Iruka in the plan and hope for the best. If it succeeded, it could only help, as the man was a teacher and could intervene if anything happened during classes. It would also meant a valuable person to confirm his words if his backup plan of revealing his multiple personas to graduate had to be implemented. Sensei, can you keep a secret? Iruka looked deeply into the eyes of his favorite student. It better not be something like your plan from 2 years ago. Ouch. He remembered that one. He'd infiltrated the academy during the night and changed the names on every single exam for his own. He was sure at the time that he'd pass with at least one of those. Of course, the teachers saw through the ruse instantly, especially with the differences between his handwriting and the other students' handwriting. Punishment in the end, 2 weeks of garbage duty approved by the Hokage. No, it's nothing like that. It's something that'll allow me to pass my classes even with those teachers punishing me for no reason. Iruka instantly gathered himself to refute Naruto's words, but it died on his lips as soon as his thoughts turned towards teachers other than him. Mizuki was the one who he'd known the best, and the man had, right in front of him, betrayed his own village and tried to kill him. He'd even manipulated Naruto to achieve his ends, all out of his hate of the Kyuubi. He knew he wasn't like that, but he realized that others might not have been fair regarding the child in front of him. He'd never actually really verified that the others were doing their job correctly, and he now knew of at least one case where he should have. I'm listening. He'd expected for Naruto to launch himself in one of his usual frenzied explanations, but all he did was clap his hands twice and say, "You can all come out now." Instantly the air was filled with the sound of crashing metal. "And try not to destroy everything while you're at it." The door to Naruto's closet opened and out stepped 2 other Narutos and a girl, all 3 holding various weapons and saying, "Then don't shove people into closets, dummy." While the Naruto in front of him started an argument with those 3, others came out from various places. Iruka boggled at the numbers. There were at least 3 dozens of them, half of them looking like Naruto, and all of them seemed solid, taking into account most were dragging something or other. Focusing on those not looking like Naruto, the Chunin tried noting a pattern. Nothing came to mind until he realized that one of them was visibly a female version of Shikamaru, except as a blonde. Then he realized that brunette looked quite a bit like Sasuke, and that, all in all, Iruka could identify half of those not looking like Naruto as Narutos under various henges, only because he could recognize the source. The transformations were excellent as Naruto's had always been, and there was no blurred edge or inconsistency in sight. Something Iruka could only expect of a fellow Chunin, if anything. "So, what's this prank you're planning?" The Chunin had to agree he was now intrigued. If a single Naruto could manage to paint over the Hokage monument, what could 30 of them do? He shuddered at the possibilities. "It's pretty simple actually. Since the other teachers keep kicking me out of school or giving me false information, I'll go as multiple people. If I, Naruto, get kicked out, the others will still be there in class." All the other clones nodded. Iruka had to agree that wasn't so bad as far as Naruto's pranks were concerned. It just gave him a chance to live life outside the constraints of being the Kyuubi's jailer. "Also, if I fail again the exam but one of my clones passes, I can just go to the Hokage and explain the situation. I'm sure the old man won't stop me from passing if I can prove I'm worth the grade." Iruka saw the boy's point. If they were unfair towards him as Naruto, they could manage to stop him from succeeding. The other 2, however, would have the same normal chance as anybody of graduating. He had to agree that he couldn't see much that was harmful to others about this plan of his. The worst thing about it was that he'd have 3 chances at each and every test, but he'd have to take them all in a row. Iruka didn't think the few seconds between each attempt would allow for much improvement. "So, can you keep this a secret? Please? Please!" chorused the army in front of him in perfect synchronization. Iruka wasn't immune to the puppy dog eyes of his student, and seeing them from a 30 or so faces made all his resistance crumble in an instant. Sure, I won't say anything. But you've got to promise no pranks from your clones at the academy. I have enough on my plate with one of you. I don't need 2 more following suit." "Promised. Anyway, they wouldn't be hidden well if they were always doing the same things as me, would they?" Iruka nodded. It seemed like his student had really thought about this. The Chunin just hoped he wouldn't have too much trouble holding back his laughter at the situations that were sure to follow. A single Naruto stepped forward and grabbed the ramen that Iruka had left on the kitchen counter. Iruka was pretty sure this one was the original, but actually wondered. "Now ramen! Ramen!" the rest chorused. Where are the 2 that had earned some ramen yesterday? For some reason only 2 clones came forward, one transformed while the other not, while the rest swore or looked at Naruto dejectedly. Iruka was amazed. Somehow they were all independent of each other. "Naruto, you've got to explain to me what happened in the past 2 days. "A second. You people," he said, turning towards the clones. "Get this place back the way it was, then back to your work. Those scrolls won't get in order by themselves." "Yash!" they answered in mass. "Now, where do you want me to start?" As Naruto polished his 3rd bowl of ramen, Iruka was incredulous. So much in only 2 days. 2 forbidden techniques, more weapons than the Chunin had seen on a fully equipped ANBU squad, and still upwards of 1,000 clones of Naruto running around. He knew the boy was capable of great things, but so soon. And his plan. Iruka actually admired the plan for its simplicity. He'd never checked a student for henge, not unless 2 copies of said student arrived in class. If Naruto could manage to get 2 clones enrolled in the academy, everybody would assume they were normal students, not some kind of infiltration mission. Naruto would have to work on his henges though. "Naruto." The teacher interrupted his student in his eating. "Which clones are you going to send to the academy?" Iruka had difficulty believing that each clone was different, but proof was all around. If it wasn't the few arguments that sprang along some kind of map, it was the different opinions they had about the techniques they were sorting. He had no clue how Naruto managed such a feat, but applauded him nonetheless. I hadn't really decided why. Can I go? Said both clones eating ramen with them at the table, obviously having been listening to the conversation. Sure, why not? Well, Iruka interfered. You'll need a better henge than that then. What do you mean? The transformed clone answered. I've been all over town and no one ever recognized me. For random civilians or for short periods of time it's more than good enough. However, for academy teachers it's not. I can see you've based your look on Kiba, and that enough for doubt. You'll need to make up two completely different forms, not based on anybody, if you really want to fool Chunits. Now, for your two disguises. 6. 6? Why 6? 2 for the academy. 2 in civilian school. And 2 more simply for looking around, and buying stuff for the others. Iruka was stunned at the idea. Sure, the most difficult of those was Ninja Academy, but with 2 other places at the same time? The amount Naruto would be able to learn was enormous. He suddenly realized that he was seeing the rise of an infiltration specialist like Konoha never had before, and couldn't believe from what source. Okay, 6 then. Can you bring 3 more clones up here? With only a few words, Iruka had 6 Narutos in his usual orange suit standing right in front of him, the original among them. The Chunin realized that Naruto was unusually focused on his words, the like of which he'd never been in class. Okay. Now tell me what you've come up until now. Not much really. All the Narutos standing before him scratched the back of their heads. Only idea I had was that half of us should be girls. That's a good start actually. And scary if he managed to pull it off. Very few people were able to impersonate people of the other sex effectively, but that made people finding out much less likely if managed correctly. The last 3 Narutos did a few seals, and then turned into female versions of themselves. Iruka feared they'd use the boys' so-called Oiroku no Jutsu, but they were fully clothed. Anybody knowing the transformation technique would divine that the original was Naruto, though most civilians would think them sisters or female twins. The female Narutos were a little too top-heavy for kids of their age, but that was something to be worked on later. There was something else that was nagging him, but he just couldn't put a finger on it. First point, hair and eyes. Those are your 2 most recognizable traits. Therefore, they're the ones you must change the most radically. A chorus of Henj no Jutsu, was his answer. No pink hair. I know Sakura in your class has some, but it stands out horribly. Change it. Good thinking on the different eye shape, but not that shade of green. Take a more natural one. Change the body size a little. You're the smallest student in the class, so your clones should be a little taller. Shrink those breasts a little. Back up. What hand seals did you do again? The original Naruto looked at Iruka strangely. Ram, why? Ram? Why ram? It didn't even figure in the usually needed seals. Yeah, I know it's supposed to be reverse snake, horse, ram, but I always found it more easy with just ram. Is there a problem with that? Where did you get that information? On the sheet the teacher gave every student. I'd missed a class, but the teacher was kind enough to give me one anyway. Do you still have it? I think I do. With that, Naruto dashed into his bedroom, jumping over a set of clones along the way. He came back minutes later with an old sheet of wrinkled paper. Here. He handed the sheet to Iruka. To Iruka's eyes, it obviously was a printout like the one he usually gave after showing a technique. It was, however, wrong on so many levels that its simple presence disgusted Iruka. Half the text about the technique was missing, with a good quarter modified to uselessness. The seals shown were totally wrong, and didn't even fit with any technique Iruka had knowledge of. Reverse snake was so rare, he barely knew a single technique that used it. Iruka had never questioned Naruto's transformation technique, as it was evident, even through his multiple pranks, that he was more proficient than most genins with it. Now it looked like he should have, even if it was only to make sure Naruto had received the right printout. You sure that was a teacher who gave you that? Sure. It was old man Kawasaki, you know, the one you replaced. You teach ninjutsu way better than him, actually. The Chunin teacher was appalled to find that Naruto was actually more right than he knew with his words that the teachers punished him for no reasons. He now had physical proof that at least one had tried to force Naruto never to be a ninja. How horrible. Konoha seemed now a much shadier place, he realized. Wait a minute. Looking at the Naruto Iruka had been talking to for the past few minutes, he asked. You're the real one, right? Right. Can you turn into a copy of me? I want to test something about your technique. Sure. A burst of smoke later, an exact copy of him was looking right in his eyes. Stretch your hands to the side, maximum extension. He did. Iruka grabbed both his wrists and squeezed hard. Ouch. You don't have to press so hard. Sorry, just testing something. Something impossible, that was what. Don't move now. Iruka poked Naruto in the forehead, then pushed hard suddenly. He pushed his copy's head back a little, but Naruto visibly was trying to move as little as possible. My gods, it's physical. Of course it is, replied his student, turning back into himself. It's not a transformation for nothing, you know. Iruka almost started correcting him, but realized it would only sadden the kid to know. He held back his lecture, and instead answered, I meant I'm surprised your technique is that good considering you're just using a third of the seals. That's actually pretty advanced for your age. He'd go to the Hokage afterwards and explain the situation to him, which would be much more productive. Naruto, and his clones, Iruka suddenly realized, beamed at the compliment. But let's go back to your different henges. Turn back to the point where you left. He did. It seems all good enough, though this one. He pointed at the last male clone in the line. And this one? He pointed to the female clone right beside it. Are a little too similar. That's the plan, actually. Both clones answered. We thought pretending to be brother and sister might explain us appearing about the same time. Good, but that means both of you will be the ones going to civilian school. Two of the same family at the same time is pretty rare for ninjas. The 6 clones nodded. Have you given thought to how you'll get your clones to be officially in Konoha? I thought they might be orphans like Tasuki from last year. Not a bad idea, but it won't work for all of them. Konoha gets orphans from outside wanting to be ninja once every year or two, so both of them at the same time would be drawing some attention. So what do you suggest? Iruka thought for a second. The most important will be the 2 clones going as shinobi. I'd say to enter the boy as an orphan, but for the girl I'd have her father bring her to Konoha, saying she want to become a shinobi. We get some of those regularly, mostly women or second sons from outside merchants. Remember Tenten 2 years ago? Naruto nodded. It happened like that for her. Wait, interrupted a clone. Where would we get her father? Another clone, simply. What about the 2 civilians? For them, 2 choices. Either we pass them as orphans and get them into an orphanage, or we. Not gonna happen. All the Narutos standing before the Chunin shouted. Naruto could remember his time in the orphanage very well, and wasn't going to return there even for something like that. He barely stayed there until he was 6, especially since no foster parents wanted him, and he was glad when the Sandaime finally intervened and gave him his apartment. He tried escaping at least 100 times, and he was pretty sure the only reason the Hokage gave him his own place was so that those masked guys wouldn't have to hunt him over and over again. Okay. Iruka decided not to argue about that fact. So they need to come to Konoha with their family. Buy a house, start a shop or get a job, and enroll their kids into school. Nothing special about that. One thing though we need to make sure is that none of them arrive at the same time. For people, no matter different they are, would be grouped together if they arrive at the same time or close to. Okay, noted. But how are we supposed to buy a house? And how about the 2 clones looking around? For those looking around, we don't actually need the paperwork that comes with people going to school. Everyone will just assume that they have the necessary paperwork. It's not like Konoha citizens need an identity card or something like that. For a house though. Iruka couldn't really think of a good answer. He himself had one, but sharing it would be very suspicious. And he couldn't expect Naruto to have the funds required for such an undertaking. He made and discarded a few plans in his head, and the only thing he could come up was going to the Hokage for funds. He had to choose his words carefully to get what he needed and still keep his promise to Naruto, but if any could be talked into helping, the Sandaime was the right person. Let me check a few things first. He finally answered. I might have an idea, but I'll need to talk to someone first. Remember your promise. I will, he answered, stepping back towards the door. He'd barely eaten half his ramen with everything going on, but he was sure it wouldn't go to waste in this place. I will see you later, Naruto. With that, he stepped outside Naruto's apartment and walked quickly towards what he hoped would be a good meeting with the most powerful person in Konoha. Naruto had never noticed that Iruka had kept the sheet with the transformation instructions with him. The door closed behind Naruto's favorite Chunin with a sound akin to the ringing of a gong. The original Naruto, still in his henge as the female ninja that would be going with him to the academy, quickly looked around. There were smiles all around, be it on the other transformed bunshins or the clones working on weapons or scrolls in the background. The plan was still on. Yada! The original exclaimed, jumping of joy. Not only they'd managed to get Iruka to promise not to say anything, but they'd even gotten his help with the prank. And the Chunin even said he was above his age about something. He high-fived the other clones that stood for Iruka's henge review, and noticed that he wasn't the only partying. The clones in the background had evidently been listening to everything. 4 of them were even launching another one in the air repeatedly at their success. Now enough fun, we still have a lot to do, the real Naruto's voice cut through the celebrations. Status report. Scrolls are about 3/4 done, though we've added another category, answered a Naruto standing before the pile of remaining scrolls. He neglectfully tossed the scroll he'd been holding into another pile. What's that? Suicidal techniques that might be interesting to learn. For clones, I mean. Good call on that. Sacrificing a single clone for an opponent isn't much of a loss for us. They all nodded. Weapons and armor? Everything sorted. It was especially easy since no clone came while Iruka was here. Oh yeah, the clones he'd burst while hiding stuff must have passed the message, and the ones outside had logically stayed away. They'd probably remain so until they received an all clear. So what clones don't have anything to do? A dozen raised their hand. Okay, so come up here. The selected Bushins did. You gang are gonna train in the specific henges we're holding. You're gonna continue until you can pass from one to any other fluidly, then you're gonna burst yourselves. We need to pass both the knowledge of these forms and the fact that Iruka is gone as soon as possible. With the Naruto's innate mastery of the transformation technique, it took barely 2 minutes before the first clone dispersed himself by jamming his head on the corner of Naruto's kitchen table. Naruto tested the forms right after that. Good, everything was perfect. Memories surged again barely an instant later, so Naruto expected another of his clones outside had a message to send. He remembered a whole lot of going around the forest, grabbing stuff, and had memories of doing the same in Konoha. He remembered finding an abandoned mansion, with seals protecting the windows. He'd remembered using the chakra draining technique to bypass them, and going inside to find dozens of abandoned rooms. Good, he'd found a new use to that technique. He'd even found a giant underground training room. But the main memory was the following words, the last thing he'd heard before bursting. All Narutos should come and see this as soon as possible. We possibly have an even better training ground found now. Coming back to the present, the real Naruto found all his clones looking at him with eager eyes. They were very obviously waiting for his approval. You! He pointed towards one of the clones that had taken liberties with the ramen Iruka left. You stay here in case Iruka comes back. The rest of you, let's go. Yash! Naruto's apartment then proceeded to empty itself through its single window. Coming up in front of Hokage Tower, Iruka made to the guards the hand sign meaning he required a meeting with the Hokage. His presence wasn't anything special. As the top teacher at the academy, he met with the Sandames sometimes more than twice a day. Most of those meetings were actually about Naruto, though the Chunin had actually lodged complaints about other students some of those times. The various guards let him pass as they always did, though the ANBU guarding his door stopped him. It seemed that the Hokage was busy, and that Iruka would have to wait. And wait he did, his mind going over the words and phrases he would use. He was pretty sure the Hokage would agree with his proposition, but the trick was how not to reveal too much and break the promise he made. He would if he had to. The opportunity to get Naruto a normal education was worth more, but Iruka was a man of his word and he'd do everything in his power not to come to that. Anyway, he was pretty sure that the Sandame would keep Naruto's secret if it came that he had to reveal it. The man had always tried everything to get Naruto accepted in Konoha, so he'd continue on with this secret. A tap on his shoulder interrupted his musing. One of the ninja guarding the door was there, trying to get his attention. He'd been thinking so hard he'd even forgotten to pay attention to his environment. The Hokage will see you now, the man said. Chapter 3, A Base of Operations. Good day, Hokage-sama. Ah, Iruka, glad to see you out and in good health. I see the medics didn't hold you long. Though the Sandaime was not supposed to have any favorites, he could readily admit to himself that Yumino Iruka was one of the chunin he preferred. The man was one of the best teachers the academy ever had, and genuinely cared about the success of his students. It was sad the man had given up on becoming jonin, as he would have liked to see what a team led by someone like him could have accomplished. Longer than they should have, Hokage-sama, but not too much luckily. And for what reason have you come before me today? Has Naruto painted over my face once again? No, Hokage-sama, but I did come back from a meeting with him. And I supposed he is once again angry at being stuck for another year at the academy? I wish I could help him, especially since those of his age just passed while he didn't, but the council would have my head if I showed the Kyuubi child any measure of favoritism. To them, it's already too much that he stays alive. It isn't that, Hokage-sama. Actually, Iruka suddenly realized Naruto hadn't said one word against his failing at the academy. May I ask a question? You may. What priority would you give to Naruto having a normal childhood, and the same chance as anyone at the academy? How I wish that could be so, the Sandaime replied, looking out the window at the Hokage monument. It will unfortunately never happen. As much as I'd like to weed out from Konoha those seeing Naruto as the Kyuubi, they are much too numerous and powerful. I thought Mizuki could be trusted with the students, and look what happened. He took a puff from his pipe. It is simply not to be. What if I told you I had a way of doing such a thing? Would you back such an attempt? The Hokage put his pipe down and stared at the chunin in his office. Explain. I cannot. Why? He owed the fourth that chance, and he'd already flubbed it so much the man feared what his afterlife would be. It is Naruto's plan, his prank as he calls it. He made me swear not to reveal to anyone its content. Is it like his frequent plans to pass the academy? It is not anything illegal, I hope? From what I know of his plan, it's totally unlike any he's had before. Part of his plan actually includes returning to the academy for another year, which should ease your concern about this being another of those quick passing plans of his. It did. What about the legality of such a thing? It is borderline, I will admit, but not something really defined. It is more like abusing the system for his own good. Iruka, I will trust your judgment on this. If you were in my place and learned of such a thing, would you agree with it? With what I learned about Mizuki and the proof I had today, I would, Hokage-sama. He bowed at the trust the Sandaime showed him on this. What proof? Iruka removed the transformation's instructions that Naruto had forgotten to reclaim. This. He handed the sheet to his superior. The Hokage's office was silent for a few moments while the elder man read the instructions contained on the paper. But this makes no sense at all? Where did you get such a falsified document? Naruto handed it to me at my request. He'd received it 2 years hence, during his first year in the academy, from his ninjutsu instructor. He'd been sent out of class, but the man graciously, Iruka added with evident sarcasm, gave him a copy. Gears turned inside the Sandaime's head, and he didn't like the results they were giving. You meant these are all the instructions Naruto Uzumaki received for performing the Henj no Jutsu? But it's his best technique. He even knocked me out with its use. He did? Yes. He called it his Oroike no Jutsu, but the basic principle remains. I was unconscious for hours after that. The Hokage smiled at the memory of such an inventive use of the basics. The Chunin smiled too. He nailed me with that one too, Hokage-sama. I must admit it does take one by surprise. Then how was he able to achieve such a feat? I do not know, Hokage-sama. What I know is that the technique Naruto uses is not the same one as the academy teaches. His produces actual physical changes. Actual physical. You realize what you are saying is preposterous. I know, Hokage-sama. I tested it myself, and even then had actual difficulty believing it. Naruto even confirmed it. He knows. He always did. But with the instructions he received. The Hokage looked down at the instruction sheet once again. I can see why with these instructions he thought that way. How is it that this never came to light before? I must admit that I had never put careful attention to the way he performed the technique. It was so evident he had no problems with it that I focused on other students having difficulties. I see how that might have happened. The ninja leader took back his pipe and gratefully breathed in another puff of tobacco. You are sure this prank of Naruto will allow him to get an unbiased education? Yes, Hokage-sama. And why are you coming to me then? To succeed, Naruto and I are in need of certain means that are outside those of a chunin or an academy student. I wondered if I could get your approval for access to such means. You will not say more? Iruka bowed deeply. Please do not force me to break my promise, Hokage-sama. I probably have already said too much. The Hokage took another puff of his pipe. He liked Iruka and trusted him, but a prank from Naruto. Promises. It all came down to promises. Iruka had promised Naruto to keep his secret. The third had promised the fourth to take care of his child, the one who'd saved Konoha. He really had no choice. If he'd wanted to look at his successor in the face, he needed to go along. He tried so much to get that result, failed so many times. He just had to do it. Taking a blank scroll from his second drawer, he started writing. He had no choice but to be very general, as he knew very little. There, he thought, as he imprinted the Hokage's seal in wax at the bottom with his ring. If this wasn't enough, he didn't think anything would be. At least he would be able to say to his successor that he tried his best. Here. The Hokage tossed Iruka the scroll. You should be able to get what you need with this. However, I will be holding you responsible for this plan of Naruto, you understand? Yes, Hokage-sama. Then good luck and Godspeed, Chunin. Bouncing over the rooftops of Konoha, Naruto was assaulted by dozens of memories. Many of the clones outside had also responded to the all-call, and had fallen to the considerable defenses that the place had. Luckily, by the time Naruto arrived with the clones that had been working in his apartment, the path to take had been very much cleared of traps. Some of his clones were actually still in the process of removing them, tearing up parts of the floor with seals inscribed on them, or cutting tripwires, so getting to the place they'd been called was easy. Whoever this place had belonged to, they'd been home security fanatics, that was for sure. Naruto found the clone who called them in the basement of the place, and what a basement that was. It was easily 200 meters deep and more than that wide. Naruto instantly agreed that it would make a much more effective training ground, mainly because of the fact it was hidden and because it might actually be able to fit all his clones inside it. The boy made his way before the clone that had summoned them, the crowd of clones already present moving to make way. So you like? Said the Bunshin who'd found the place. You sure it's not used? Judging by the cobwebs I found when I made my way here, I'd say only spiders could state this as a living place by now. You know who did it belong to? Some folks called the Uraharas. Don't know anything about them. I do, replied one of the clones that had followed Naruto from his apartment. One of them created Kido Kagayaki, one of the techniques on the Forbidden Scroll. Not only that one, added another. I'd say 1 out of every 4 techniques I looked at was made by someone of the Urahara clan. Most of the clones from the apartment nodded in agreement. So this is the place of people who created forbidden techniques? I can see why they needed a place as big as this to train, Naruto exclaimed. You don't know the half of it, replied a clone. More than half the techniques I sorted coming from them ended up in one of the 2 suicidal piles. Like what? Like a technique that instantly turns all your chakra into electricity, while it's still in your body. It electrocutes anybody you are holding on, but even if you survive the shock, your coils will probably be permanently damaged. Stuff like that. Naruto shuddered. Sure seems like every forbidden technique damages your coils. The mass of Bunshins nodded. Not really, said a clone coming from the apartment. I've been sorting techniques for a while, and there are a few common reasons. Chakra intensive or damage to the chakra coils is one, but there's also jutsu that are simply too dangerous for normal people to try and teach. There are those banned mostly for political reasons, those that will simply kill you if you get them right. Really? Yup. There's one that physically turns your body into a bomb and blows you up. There's one that uses your soul as a sacrifice to summon the god of death. Another simply instantly kills you. Was probably made to use in case you were going to be captured. Well, that's all good, but this is a discussion for another time, cut the clone who'd summoned them here. I think everyone here is in agreement that this is the best place to use as a main base, correct? Yeah. There are at least 4 exits from here that lead outside the house. Though the clones I've sent to look have come back yet, I'm reasonably sure the east one ends up somewhere in the forest. I'll confirm that, said a voice coming from the back of the crowd. But not only there. The path branches sometime after the door, so there's at least 3 different exits that way. The one I checked does lead to the forest though, ending as a false wall in a cave. Same thing to the north, called out another voice. Ends up in the sewers for the exit I mapped, but there's at least 4 more. Ditto for south. Exit ends up in a training ground. West has at least 4, the one I checked leads into an abandoned shop. The crowds parted to give way to the 4 clones, who stopped in front of the original and the one who'd found the place. Good work, said the real one. But you'll need to go back. Each take 20 or so clones with you, and map out everything. Burst yourselves as soon as you get to the exit, since we'll need to know how best to gather the stuff we left in the apartment. That stuff needs to move pronto. It was chance enough that Iruka agreed to keep our secret. There's no saying what would happen if the old man came looking. All clones shuddered at the thought of the Sandame finding their apartment like that. Naruto liked the man, really he did, but the town leader could be very harsh when he wanted. So, apart from this place, found anything else? Well, the usual. A few shuriken and kunai, a scroll or 2. But I haven't finished looking around this place. I called you as soon as I found this, and waited with the rest of them. Okay. The original thought for a few seconds. First thing here is cleaning up the inside of this place. We need to make sure no traps are left, as I don't want to lose a foot to an explosive trap we forgot. However, don't change anything that might be visible outside. We need people to think it's still abandoned or else we might get unwanted visitors. Yash! As the orange swarm of his clone army dashed towards the various exits, Naruto took a good look around his new training facility. Without his many copies it seemed even more spacious, and he could see there were various different features that had evaded his notice the first time. There were a few rocky outcroppings around on one side, while on the other a few pools stood, still full, surprisingly, probably for water element training. The lighting was provided by huge seals totally alien to the few Naruto had already seen. He wondered how the Iruka had managed to place those on the ceiling, however. A burst of knowledge interrupted his musings. One of the clones upstairs had fallen afoul a seal linked to a kunai thrower. Naruto sighed. As more and more memories surged from his dying doppelgangers, Naruto stopped his analysis of the room and focused on sorting the various thoughts, hoping to find amongst all of them the various exits he'd need mapped. Iruka had wasted no time in running back towards Naruto's apartment as soon as the Hokage gave him leave. He'd started thinking as soon as the Sandame's scroll was in his hand, and realized that he had only 2 weeks to prepare Naruto for his multiple entries into the academy, and that along with the natural preparations he had to perform for the next starting class. He was going to be pretty rushed as is, having missed 2 days due to Mizuki's poison shuriken, so he wanted to waste no time in making Naruto ready. Entering his student's home via the window, the Chunin was surprised to see it was nearly empty. The various weapons were still around, true, but the numerous clones he'd seen earlier were very much absent. In fact, there was only a single Naruto there. He was slowly but surely finishing the ramen Iruka had brought earlier. The teacher strode forward and asked how many clones finally came to their limit. I see. Actually, Iruka was a little grateful for the absence of clones. He was himself a well-trained ninja, and his reserves were nothing to be ashamed about, but he was pretty sure that he wouldn't even be able to form half this many clones with this technique. He had problems doing that many at once with the normal Bunshin, and it was well known that the Kage Bunshin demanded much more out of the user. Naruto slurped the many noodles he had in his mouth before swearing. Nope, they just left to check out the new place one of them found. Wait a second, I need to send a message. With a single hand seal, another clone appeared right beside the first. The new clone wasted no time in bursting himself by stabbing his own hand down a spear hanging on the wall. You're calling the clones back? Nope, just messaging Naruto. I'm pretty sure he's the one you really want to talk to. Yes, I mean, you're not the real one? Nope, clone, said Bunshin, slurped down the broth of his bowl with an appreciative noise. Oh, I almost forgot. Thank you for the ramen. And you can use the Kage Bushin? Sure, why not? Iruka had been thinking of what excuses he might use for Naruto to be able to replace his clones while they were practicing ninjutsu, but he wondered now if his students' chakra reserves were actually infinite. I mean, it was one thing to be able to use a Jonin-level technique, but it was quite another to be able to produce 100 clones each able to use the same technique. And without dispersing themselves, even. What was that boy anyway? Naruto recognized instantly the memories of the clone he left in his apartment. Iruka wouldn't have come back without answers, he knew, and the Chunin stance made it quite possible that he'd gotten what he needed. With a quick seal, he formed a single clone. Okay, he said to the clone. You're gonna stay here and pass the message. As soon as they've finished upstairs and the exits are fully explored, we're going to start packing stuff from the apartment. Unless there's a quicker way, use the closest exit in the sewers. We'll use the grate in the alley beside the building as an exit. Yes, sir, the clone said, standing ramrod straight and saluting. For a second, Naruto wondered what thoughts were going on in the heads of his clones. Then he burst into motion. Somewhere close to half the paths leading out were already explored, and one of them was the one leading to the sewers close to his own place. He used that one and, after 3 failed attempts, found the ladder leading to the grate in the alley next to his apartment. From there he was only a few bounds from his window. Entering, he realized that his teacher had gone back to his ramen. Good, he deserved it. Meanwhile, Naruto turned towards his clone. You know how I got here? I have a good idea. Evidently he'd remembered the very same things Naruto did. Then you're gonna take the same path and return there. When's time to start packing, you'll lead them here, okay? Yes, boss. The copy left through the window that Naruto had just entered from. So, Iruka, how was your meeting? Good enough. The Hokage gave me this scroll to prove my access to enough money for your prank. He handed the scroll to Naruto. The old man? Damn. I wanted to surprise him. He doubted he could, as the town leader always seemed informed of everything happening. Hopefully he'd play along as he always did. I didn't tell him anything about your prank, Naruto. I managed to get that scroll without saying too much, I think. Good. Naruto trusted Iruka's word. If he thought he didn't say too much, then that was good enough for him. Iruka continued eating his noodles in silence while Naruto checked out what the Sandaime had given them access to. Iruka? Yes? Did you actually read the scroll? Actually, I did not. I wanted to inform you as soon as possible. I think you better read it. The Chunin took back the scroll Naruto was handing him, and read. The bearer of this document is acting with my full will and backing. All demands made by the bearer are to be considered as coming from me, Sandaime Hokage Sarutobi. All information, discussions and relevant documents are to be ranked as an S rank, secret, with appropriate security bindings. Any information revealed is to be treated as an act of treason and to be punished with a capital penalty. So decreed, Honorable Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen. My God, the teacher exclaimed. Is it as much as I thought it is? Iruka nodded mechanically. He knew he hadn't given much information to the elder ninja, but he was pretty sure that the man had understood that it was money he was asking for. A document like this one was on a whole different scale. He technically had access to any amount of money with that, amongst other things. Hell, with a document like this one, he could probably order the ANBU out on mission. I think, Naruto, that I'm going to keep this with me for a while, Iruka said, rolling the scroll and putting back in his pocket. He trusted Naruto a lot, but he was pretty sure that the boy wouldn't be able to help himself, and use it for pranks if he knew how much power it gave. But it's gonna help us with the prank, yes? Of course. That paper's gonna get us enough to buy a house? Easily. With that I could get enough to probably buy half of Konoha. Naruto smiled. Seemed everything was back on track. Now to explain about his new place. Say, Iruka, do you know anything about the Urahara clan? The teacher thought for a few seconds. They were an old clan that joined Konoha when it was created. Never as big as the Uchiha or the Hyuga, though. It was said they and the Uchiha hated each other with a passion. Why's that? Well, they were well known for creating many techniques, so I supposed it was natural that they be opposed to a clan that had the Sharingan. Also, there were rumors that the Urahara were very fluid with the law, something a clan known for being the ninja police mustn't have liked. Ninja police? You probably don't remember since you were so young, but before they were nearly exterminated, the Uchiha were well-known members of the military police. They were the ones who enforced the law inside Konoha, instead of the ANBU as it is now. And the Urahara, what happened to them? Well, the last died out fighting the Kyubi, though the clan had been dying for decades from what I heard. Seemed they kept killing themselves trying to create new and more powerful techniques. So, they had a mansion, or compound, or something. What happened to it? Same thing that happens to all the proprieties of ninja families dying out. They go back to the Hokage. Some are turned into training grounds, others are sold to merchant families for money. Why do you ask? Would it be possible to buy out their place? Why? Naruto racked his brain for an explanation that might fit with what he wanted, but in the end decided it would be better to show his new place to the Chunin teacher. It would a valid explanation by itself. Iruka, can I show something? Something that just as secret as the prank? The adult thought for a second, but went with the fact that whatever Naruto had hidden, it would be better if he knew and could convince the boy not to do. Sure. Follow me. The two ninjas jumped back to the alley, only to find a clone there holding the grate open, and clones coming out one by one. A flicker of surprise crossed Iruka's face at the sight. He wondered if he would ever get used to the massive amount of bunshins that could be there any time now. Naruto, however, went directly into what the Chunin started calling boss mode. Straightening himself, he looked at his clones with obvious leadership. You all know what to take, right? A chorus of nods answered him. Remember to place everything back as it was before this whole thing started. Now go! Yosh! Some clones answered, while other immediately jumped for his windows without saying anything. Waiting until the clones stopped coming out, Naruto led Iruka back on the path he'd used to come to his apartment. Iruka, however, paid careful attention to the way. As a ninja, he was no stranger to secrets paths or hidden exits, but the depth of these was surprising. By his estimations, they were at least 300 meters under Konoha. The Chunin suddenly had a flash of fear at the thought that the Orange Academy student might have found a hidden ANBU supply depot or something of the sort, and feared what the boy might come up with that many explosive tags. It fit with what he had seen. A hidden entrance somewhere accessible but not obvious, aka the sewers, paths lit by chakra seals, way below Konoha. The only thing bizarre was the signs of disuse, mainly seen through the damaged seals not longer producing light that came up frequently. When the Chunin finally exited the various corridors and entered the room proper, he actually wondered where he was. It was evident that this wasn't of ANBU make, being way too large to have any purpose except as a shelter. The only other thing that came to mind was that this was a training ground. Naruto, what is this place? The Uraharas I talked about earlier. Iruka nodded. This is their basement. Looking around, the academy teacher could divine what this place had been when the former clan was still active. It was a perfect place to train your people in techniques that were either illegal or dangerous. The paths like the one he took would have been of great value for the smuggling operations that they were accused but never proved of doing. Especially if there were roads leading the other way in the forest. Okay, I understand you asking what they were. But why do you want to buy such a place? We'll need a place to meet. Iruka didn't understand. What do you mean? I mean me, my clones. Even you. The fact that you would eat supper with me might not be suspicious. But if you keep being seen around me or my clones all the time, someone's gonna figure out something's wrong before long. The same thing with my transformed clones. If I keep hanging with them while everyone keeps telling them that I'm a demon, one day a person will find that bizarre and investigate. And that's not saying what might have happened if the wrong person had come to my apartment while it was filled with weapons. Iruka paused for a second, thinking the implications while bunshins came and went carrying weapons and ninja tools. He had to agree the boy had a point. The fact that the Chunin had gone a whole day with Naruto might not draw attention, especially since the boy had just saved him, but whole weeks? He reasoned that having a secret meeting place might be the best, especially one that seemed to have so many secret exits. Actually, Naruto having his own place might solve quite a few problems. The Chunin had seen the looks the other tenants of his building gave him, and didn't think it was a good environment for the boy to live in. The size of his apartment also made most training difficult, and with the reactions of most Konoha citizens he didn't think he'd be able to buy another place when the time came, not unless he paid exorbitant prices. This house was abandoned and its deed was probably in Shinobi archival, so it wasn't as if he was hurting anyone. All in all, it was a good plan, and one easily done with the powers the Hokage had granted him. Okay. First thing first, nobody is allowed to talk about the fact that you're the Kyuubi's prison. That fact is a secret as well guarded as the one of your prank, and you saw what the punishment was for that one. About that. What is capital punishment actually? Death by execution. That's probably what awaits Mizuki as soon as the ANBU find out what were his plans with the Forbidden Scroll. You mean that talking about my prank to someone is punishable by death? To someone who doesn't know, yes. That means that except you, since you're the source of both these secrets, anyone talking about either the Kyuubi's jailer or your prank is forbidden to the greatest level. Okay, Naruto said, nodding numbly. What's second? Second is that I agree with your reasoning, and think this place will make a much better home for you. Since it's probably the official property of Konoha by now, tomorrow I'll go to Shinobi Archival and get the official deed. That's all we need actually, and the Hokage's paper grants me more than enough power to do so. Naruto jumped forward and hugged his favorite Chunin as hard as he could. For once, everything was going so well. He had a new place, new techniques, better equipment than ever, and he even had the best chance he ever had to pass at the academy. And with a prank, even. Wouldn't it be better going now? I mean, it's barely early evening. I prefer to wait. Me coming directly from a talk with you to go to Shinobi Archival might raise some eyebrows. I'll do it first thing tomorrow morning, along with passing at a bank for the funds we'll need. Yada! Naruto jumped of joy. A few clones passing around looked at him with curiosity, but kept working along. Now something else. Can you do the various henge we worked on earlier today? Within a second Naruto had produced another 6 clones beside him, and another had them into the various forms they'd be using regularly. Iruka, who was well used to analyzing henges, found no flaw or error in the clones. They were exactly the same as he'd remembered from before his meeting with the Hokage. Either Naruto was a natural at shape-changing, which might explain his unerring talent with the technique, or he trained extensively on those 6 shapes. Probably a bit of both. Good. Have you planned in what order you'll get them in Konoha? I think the best might be the female ninja first, the civilian family next, and the male ninja last. I agree, but we'll need to give them names first. Have you thought about that? He hadn't. He racked his brain for a few seconds, but came up with nothing that wasn't evident, like Naruto, or the name of a former classmate. In desperation, he turned towards the clones carrying the former contents of his place. Anyone have any idea of a name for our female ninja clone? The horde stopped what they were doing and plunged into thought themselves. Not really. Ariko, said one in the back. Ariko. He thought about it for a few minutes. He liked the connotations. Good, one down. How about the male one? Muramaru, said the clone who was in the specific form of that persona. It was blatant he'd been thinking about it. Muramaru it is. And the others? Naruto said, smiling. Iruka, however, couldn't help but snicker inside. It was a prank all right, and the names fit perfectly. Luckily people probably wouldn't notice the link, especially if Naruto kept from using his cloning technique too much. Now all the clones got in the game and gave their favorites, each talking over the other and trying to make himself listened to. Iruka, well used to a rowdy class, took a sheet of paper, a pen and started noting those worth something. Slowly the clones even started inventing family names, something which suited the Chunin just fine. Eventually Naruto got tired of trying to make sense of all those copies speaking over each other, and shut up everyone with an order. Here. Iruka handed the sheet he'd been taking notes on to the boy. That's a list of the ones I found the most promising. Sit down tonight and choose those you like. I'll see you tomorrow around noon. Okay. Where do we meet tomorrow? Where's best? You know Training Ground 23? Interjected a clone. You all know very well I do. It's the closest one to the academy. Meet us there then. One question though, where do you live? Why? To use the best exit of course, the clone replied. Giving general directions and receiving some in exchange, Iruka found himself coming out 30 minutes later out of a moss-covered fountain in a copse of trees a block or two from his home. He'd been there many times in his youth, even cried over his parents at this very same spot, and he never thought of finding a secret path there. He wondered where else those paths lead, and shuddered to think what could happen if one led anywhere near the Hokage monument. As Naruto looked at the back of his teacher's shirt for the second time this day, he made a few calculations in his head. Going by past experience, he realized that he only had 15 days before classes restarted. Combine that with putting a day or so between each group arriving, and the need for them to be present in Konoha at least a few days before the start of classes, it made for pretty rushed preparation. Giving the sheet with the names to one of his transformed clones, the original Naruto instead went around and gathered a few specific clones. The one who came up with Iruka was the first, along with the one who found the Urahara place and 2 of the clones who'd been sorting scrolls in his apartment. Added to that were 2 copies that had been exploring the town and the Bunshin that had first succeeded at the draining technique. He led all those in an upstairs room that had probably once been used for conferences, and sat his council right there. "So," the original said, once all were seated, "I've just realized that we had less than 2 weeks to prepare for everything that's needed before the academy." Looking around, Naruto could see each and every copy obviously counting down in their heads. He knew that they hadn't realized yet the implications that the time left meant, and that was exactly why he'd asked them here for advice. The boy had realized somewhere in the past day that even though they were his clones and that they were speaking with his voice, that didn't mean that they were thinking the very same things. He knew that they all had the same general opinions, as the whole the clones had eaten in his flagging ramen reserves kept reminding him, but their different emphasis on specific experiences meant their thoughts were not always running down the same paths. As Naruto saw the conclusion of the countdown in each pair of eyes, he continued, "That's why we need to plan down everything that's needed before the academy starts. We can't ask Iruka to think of everything like he did today." The whole table nodded. "So, anything coming to mind?" "Well, sending out the clones that are going to come from outside as soon as possible is a given." "Not right now, though," another Bushin interjected. "We need first to give them the money Iruka's gonna give us tomorrow. After that, we send them all and message them by clone once they should be coming in." "True. How about jobs?" All Narutos in the room turned towards the clone who'd given that statement. "I mean, the 2 civilians will need a mother, a father, or both." Nods all around. "So these 2 clones will either have to pretend to be rich, or have jobs. And frankly, I don't think Iruka will give us access to an enormous amount of money. So what job should they be?" The original Naruto admitted that was a valid point. Even if the civilians had a lesser chance of being found out, someone would be asking questions about their parents once for sure. That means they needed a way to be making money. The only problem with that was how. Naruto didn't know much about how civilians lived, and the few occupations he knew outside ninjas were cooks like Tuchi and Im, merchants or apartment managers. Unfortunately, Naruto had nothing he could think of selling, no skills outside the ninja arts, and didn't think he'd receive enough from Iruka to buy a whole apartment building. Talking went around, but all suggestions needed either more money than they'd likely receive, or knowledge they wouldn't be able to get in the short time needed. Eventually, the only thing possible on that front became asking Iruka for ideas, and that point was tabled. Then came the discussion on what techniques to learn, and in what order, during which the room fell in total pandemonium. Generating clones to go and get scrolls didn't help either.